Right, I think we're all here. It's 7:30. So welcome to Harlow Council's Cabinet for July 2020. Due to the COVID pandemic and the fact that some of our members are shielding, we're doing this via Zoom. So if there are any technical glitches or hiatuses, please understand the reason why. Good practice, I believe, is to have your microphone on mute unless you're speaking. And I think most of you have got that done. Thank you, to avoid background noise. And the final bit of housekeeping, I suppose, is that I'll be taking interventions and questions on the basis of the hands up on the, not the physical hand up like this, but the hands up icon on the screen. So, without further ado, we have no apologies for absence, item 1. Are there any declarations of interest? See no hands up. So I'll move on to item 3. The minutes, which for those of you with paper copies, you'll find on pages 4 to 17. Are we happy to accept those minutes as read? I can't see anybody putting their hand up.
Agreed.
If anybody disagrees, let me know. Okay, I'm going to take that as agreed then. Any matters arising from the minutes of the previous meeting? Councillor Carter, I can see your hand up there and I'm going to come to you, but it's safer if you use the icon, because if somebody else speaks, then you'll disappear from my screen, but you happen to be on my screen. So let's go straight to you to start with.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's item 125, the Town Centre Area Action Plan. Recommendation C was following consultation to submit the Town Centre Area Action Plan to the Planning Inspectorate. I'm just wondering if it's actually been submitted.
Who's going to take that answer for me?
Probably Jane will be able to update you on that.
Jane?
Hello, no, it hasn't been submitted yet. There's just final policy refinements that are being undertaken by the planning policy team. I don't know if is Andrew on the call? Yeah?
Yeah.
You might be able to update better than me, Andrew.
Yeah, that's right. Just ensuring compliance with the local plan policies, and also just taking the opportunity just to review any implications from the COVID situation. If that requires any further adjustments, we will then submit the document to the Planning Inspectorate.
Okay, I can't see any electronic hands up. Mike Hardware, did you wave at me? No, okay. So then we'll move on, please, to item 5, which is written questions from the public. Now, because of the manner in which we're having to hold this meeting, the officer Adam Rees will read the questions on behalf of the public, and then we'll give our answers. Adam.
So question number 1, in the report to Cabinet entitled Townwide HMO Article 4 Direction, dated 27 February 2020, paragraph 8 states, quote, from April 2020, there will be additional resource available to assess new applications for covenant release, and also to review the position of existing HMOs that may be in breach of covenant restrictions, end quote. In reviewing the position of existing HMOs that may be in breach of covenant restrictions, how does the council propose to identify those HMOs that may be in breach, and what criteria would be used to ensure consistency in deciding whether or not to cancel a HMO?
So, and that question was from Mr. Steve Dean. So thank you, Mr. Dean. At present, in relation to covenant restrictions, the council is focusing on new applications for HMOs or existing HMOs that are going through a change of ownership. Following this, we may then start to look at existing HMOs where there may be a breach of covenant. The legal situation of each will be assessed individually. The factors that will be used to assess whether or not to agree to a variation of covenant will focus on the location of the property and whether or not it's an area with a large number of existing HMOs, the views of the surrounding neighbours, the willingness of the owner to enter into an agreement to restrict occupancy to people with a local connection to Harlow, for example, family or employment, and the suitability of the accommodation being provided.
And question 2, also from Mr. Seeding. In the same report, paragraph 9 states, start quote, in the last year, the planning and legal teams in the council have developed a checklist to assess whether or not covenants should be released or on a case-by-case basis. This has now been verified through external legal advice and will now be utilised in all future covenant applications. The release of variation of covenants is entirely at the council's discretion, acting reasonably, and this will provide some measure of control for the council to exercise. It is proposed, however, that no covenant should be permanently removed. If it's felt to be appropriate, a covenant could be temporarily lifted, e.g. for the period of a HMO licence. End quote. Those current owners of property with a covenant in place have purchased their property in good faith and would reasonably expect Harlow Council not to allow covenant breach in adjacent property with the same covenant. Why is the council not supporting such property owners and is proposing to use valuable resources to decide on covenant release when a covenant is clearly in place and a HMO would breach it?
So again, thank you, Mr. Dean, for the question. Each individual case will be looked at on its merits and legal advice taken, since the nature of the covenants vary and it's not possible to provide a single answer for all properties. As was set out in February 2020 Cabinet report, the council needs to balance the undoubted need for HMO accommodation in Harlow with a need to prevent the loss of a large amount of family housing. It's unlikely that the council will seek to close a large number of HMOs, as this would create a significant homelessness problem. Instead, we will take a balanced approach, utilising the criteria set out in the answer to the first question. This will ensure that there is a clear rationale for each decision taken.
Question 3 is from Mr. Nicholas Taylor. If covenant release is to be implemented, in view of the statement that the release or variation of covenants is entirely at the council's discretion, how does the council plan to ensure consistency and whether or not the covenant is lifted to allow a HMO application to be granted?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Taylor. I'd refer you to the answer to the first question, Mr. Taylor. Consistency will be achieved by focusing on the location of the property and whether or not it's in an area with a large number of existing HMOs, the views of the surrounding neighbours, the willingness of the owner to enter into an agreement to restrict occupancy to people with a local connection to Harlow, and the suitability of the accommodation being provided. Further details on the criteria used can be found on the council's website.
Councillor Ingle, I think Councillor Andrew Johnson wants to raise a point of order.
Okay, I can't see his hand up, but Councillor Johnson.
Chair, I think we've got a problem with the system then, because my hand has been up since the start of questions. And I've been using the chat function. So as a member of the opposition, firstly, I really worry about our ability to raise points of order and to interject into the debate or what's going on if you're not going to admit someone who's got their hand raised or is typing that they've got a point of order. My point of order is on 10.8 of the council's constitution as published in May of this year, which I assume is the most up-to-date record. It's the most up-to-date on the website, which says that copies of all questions and written answers will be made available to councillors and the public attending the meeting. Until you said that there were questions, I've not seen anything, and I've still not got a copy of the questions and answers that are being given.
They have been, I can answer that. They have been published via a supplementary agenda on the council's website. That was done at around 7 o'clock. So if that hasn't come through to you, what we can do is we can share the questions on a screen so you can see them.
That would be useful, thank you.
And Councillor Johnson, the reason I didn't see your hand is because there's a long list of participants, 26, and only the top 8 show. And I must have inadvertently moved the list up a little bit. And when you put your hand up, you go to the top of the list, which actually put you off the screen. I'm now back at the top of the list. So if anybody wants to raise a hand, I should be able to see it. As I said, please do bear with me. I'm balancing 3 screens here. I'm finding it rather difficult. Okay, Adam, would you like to ask question 4, please?
Yes, so This question is also from Mr. James Humphreys. It's Harlow has a very large number of homes converted from offices. Can you provide a list of authorities who A, have used this accommodation, and how often they have used homes that have been converted from offices to house homeless or other families in Harlow in the last 5 years?
Okay, thank you, Chair. This is my question, Councillor Wilkinson. I firstly thank Mr. Humphreys for his very apt question. My response is, whilst there is a requirement for placing authorities to notify host authorities through section 208 notices when placing families within their boundaries, a number of authorities had not been doing this. The council therefore does not have a complete list of authorities who have used homes converted from offices under permitted development rights, how often they have been used. The council has been clear that any placing authority should comply with their legal obligation to notify the council when people are placed within Harlow and has been lobbying to achieve this.
Question number 5. It's clear from receiving the information request of Harlow Council in 2018 by the Harlow Alliance Party that many authorities were not informing Harlow Council that they were using office conversions in the town to provide temporary accommodation. How satisfied are you that other councils are now informing Harlow Council when they use former offices or indeed any other accommodation in Harlow to provide temporary homes?
Again, thank you, Mr. Humphreys, for the question. My response is, whilst the council is not satisfied that all councils are providing notice when residents are placed within Harlow, there has been progress within this area. Firstly, a number of London boroughs have agreed they will no longer move their residents to Harlow. Secondly, the council has been in dialogue with London boroughs to agree that accommodation will be inspected to meet minimum standards, vulnerable households will not be placed out of area into Essex, Essex authorities will be included in the London Interborough Accommodation Agreement, which sets and monitors rules for boroughs placing out of area within London. Placing authorities will pay no more accommodation than host authorities. Placing authorities will notify the host authority as already required under legislation. London and Essex authorities will jointly lobby the government to reduce the causes of homelessness. And lastly, standards for accommodation will be met.
Question number 6. In response to questions put to you at February's Cabinet meeting, you mentioned that Harlow Council, in respect of new homes built, have a target of 30% for affordable homes. Can you tell me what the actual figures are for the following? A, those being built on the former site of the rugby club. B, the former motor sales site. C, the former Pearson's car park. D, the Wych Elm development. E, to date, those given planning permission in the town centre. F, the homes on the site previously occupied by the Churchgate Hotel. And G, those estates which have already been completed in Newhall.
Okay, again, thank you for the question. So, with respect to A, those being built on the former site of the rugby club, the Kia development for 125 dwellings included 40 units of affordable housing, that being 32% of the total. The former motor sales site, Burnt Mill, 8.5% was affordable housing, which equated to 16 units, 7 affordable and 9 of shared ownership. The former Pearson's car park development of 361 dwellings included 12.2% affordable housing, equating to 44 units, 26 affordable rent and 18 shared ownership. The Wych Elm development of 122 dwellings included 12% affordable housing, equating to 15 units, all shared ownership. To date, those given planning permission in the town centre, the original Strawberry Star applications for blocks A, B, C and D was demonstrated to us to be unviable. No affordable housing was secured, but the legal agreement allows for a clawback mechanism should values alter in the future. A second application for part of the scheme was then agreed in 2020. This also includes no affordable housing due to viability, but continues to include a clawback mechanism should values alter in the future. discussions are ongoing between the council and the developer for the provision of 10% affordable housing on the not yet submitted second phase of the development. The Development Management Committee resolved in July 2020 to grant planning permission for 33 units at Market House. This will include 30% affordable housing, shared ownership. The homes on the site previously occupied by the Churchgate Hotel. The original planning permission included 9 affordable units, which was 35%. However, subsequently, this was altered to an off-site financial contribution of 1.35 million in lieu of on-site affordable units. Harlow Council intends using this funding to contribute towards the building of new council housing. Those estates which have been completed in Newhall. The original outline consent for 2,300 houses at Phase 2 Newhall included within the associated Section 106 legal agreement a process for a viability assessment to be applied to calculate affordable housing rates for each tranche of the development. The obligation fixes that no individual tranche of development can come forward with less than 15% housing or more than 40% affordable housing. The target is that when all the tranches are complete, the level of affordable housing provision will not exceed 33%. The most recent reserved matters, approvals at Newhall for 117 units within Phase 2 of the overall development, included 15% affordable. 49 units within Phase 2 of the overall development included 16% affordable housing. With other developments, where finances allow, we're aiming to provide 100% affordable housing. Overall, we're still aiming to hit the 30% affordable housing target.
Last question. At the Cabinet meeting in February, you were asked if you or the council had a preferred option as to where the new hospital should be built. As an elected representative and leader of Harlow Council, I expected you to do so, but didn't. The hospital board were due to commence a public engagement exercise about the services to be provided in May, but at the time of writing, this does not appear to have started. Do you think they should have consulted patients about where the new hospital was to be built before making a final decision?
So, thank you, Mr. Court. The decision for the siting of the hospital is one for the Hospital Trust to take. The council's role has been to consistently focus on supporting the Hospital Trust to secure a new hospital. I'm sure, Mr. Court, that you'll be relieved to know that the Hospital Trust intend to carry out a full public engagement on the proposed new site shortly. I will be voicing my opinions in that engagement exercise, and I would encourage you and all Harlow residents to do the same. Thank you. Right, I can't see any hands up, but do shout out if I've missed anybody. There are no written questions to councillors. Item 6, there are no petitions. Item 7, so we move on to item 8, and if you've got a printed copy, that's on pages 18 to 28, the forward plan. Councillor Charles, you've got him first.
Thank you, Chair. I could beg your indulgence just briefly to say, as this is one of the first meetings since the recovery is a focus, to pay tribute to the key workers, the nurses, the doctors and the volunteers and the many charities in our town who have supported vulnerable people during this difficult time. In terms of the forward plan, I've seen that on page 27 we have a regeneration strategy. I've also seen that on page 20 we of course have the terms and reference for the COVID working group. What we don't have is an entry in the forward plan for the final recovery strategy. When will that be?
Who's going to answer that question for me?
I will, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Harvey.
I've actually, funny you should bring it up, Councillor Charles. I was talking to Brian about that today, and following my conversation with Councillor Johnson last night, and he assures me that we can have a draft. I think, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, I said October, you said well before that, probably September, maybe August. Sorry, I should defer to you, Brian, but I'm pretty sure you said September for a draft. But as we're going to come on to shortly, We're going to have the first meeting on the 22nd of July, and I really look forward to working with colleagues to determine the roadmap from that point.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Charles, your hand's still up. Is that another question? Do go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just to follow up to that question, I think forming a recovery plan is absolutely vital, critical, that we get something in place as soon as possible along the lines of the working group, which will be discussed shortly. But can I push the portfolio holder to set a stretch target for that recovery plan to come back to Cabinet as soon as possible, within a matter of months, hopefully weeks, some interim findings, because it's within all our interests, the town's interests, that the council gets on with developing a clear recovery plan.
Councillor Hart.
Oh, I think that's what I just said we would do, Councillor Charles, in fact. But yes, I think by all means push for a stretch target, and I think that's absolutely correct. And, you know, I think we all share that ambition.
I was hoping for a month or a date at this Cabinet. Surely you have had a month, and I would hope that the forward work plan would have reflected a clear stretch target for a recovery plan, because of course we're in the recovery right now.
I regret to disappoint you, Councillor Charles.
Right. Are there any other questions? Councillor Charles, your hand's still up. I'm not sure if that's another question or... Okay, thank you. It'd help me if you put it down. I'm not being nitpicky. It's just, it helps other people rise to the top. Thank you. If there are no other hands up on the forward plan, are we happy to note that? If you're unhappy, will you voice your concerns now? Otherwise, I'll take it by agreement.
Agreed.
No dissenting voices. Thank you. So item 9, there have been no relevant decisions taken by portfolio holders under delegated powers since the last meeting of the Cabinet. And item 10 moves us on to the COVID-19 recovery progress and working group terms of reference, which you'll find.
Councillor Johnson has raised his hand.
Ah, okay. Sorry, was that on relevant decisions? Councillor Johnson?
Thank you, Chair. A second time that you've not recognised a raised hand.
Well, Councillor Johnson, in fairness, you can see me reading from a sheet. I can't have my eyes on more than one thing at the moment. Adam Rees is spotting it. He told me straight away. I came straight to you. So let's just cut that out. If you've got something to say of substance, say it.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The recent decisions has always been on the agenda to keep people informed of what is happening, and it's certainly one of the ways the opposition members who attend Cabinet are able to find out what is going on. We have, however, been in an unusual position of the leader, the deputy, the portfolio holders not taking decisions because of the extraneous COVID response that we have been in. However, the chief executive has taken a series of decisions, and I would have expected to see those decisions listed here for formal note in the Cabinet papers, since it's the first opportunity to do so since those statuses have been in place. Can I ask why they were not included tonight?
You can certainly ask. Mr. Keane?
Yeah, I mean, this is a standard item, but Councillor Johnson does have a point, and I will list all the decisions I've taken in the last 3-4 months and get them before members.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Keane, and thank you, Councillor Johnson, for your question. So, I'm checking for hands up. I can't see any. Do interrupt me if I've missed you. Item 10, the COVID-19 recovery. You'll find it on pages 29 to page 36. Who's moving that?
I am Councillor Ringle.
And I'm seconding it. Councillor Harvey, do you have anything you want to say on that?
I do, thank you. Good evening, everybody. In introducing this report, I want to begin, like Councillor Charles, by acknowledging the hardship that every person in our town has endured for the past 16 weeks. And I include every person on this call in that. Bereavement, sickness, fear, anxiety, loneliness, and anger have fallen over our town like a thick blanket. On some, the blanket has fallen heavily, others it has touched more lightly, but every one of us has felt its weight. At the same time, we've been lifted up by incredible examples of individual and collective resilience, generosity and courage. Thousands of people risked their lives working in hospitals and care homes and delivering the other essential services that have kept us safe. Too many lost their lives in doing so. Heroic contributions were also made by other sections of our community: teachers, shop workers, bin men, transport workers, postmen and women, and of course the army of volunteers and mutual aid groups which sprang up to support our most vulnerable residents. For this council, this has of course been an entirely unprecedented experience, and I want to acknowledge on behalf of all of us, I'm sure, the hard work and adaptability of officers and the leadership shown by Brian Keane and his senior management. Working closely with Rainbow Services and our many other excellent voluntary organisations, the Community Hub, which the council managed, dealt with over 60,000 inquiries from residents, made just under 3,000 telephone calls to vulnerable residents, and referred over 900 people and families to partner agencies for specialist support. Our website was kept updated with the latest information and guidance and was visited by 24,000 people. We paid out £933,000 of government hardship grants to 4,800 residents receiving council tax support. We've given out 11.4 million in government grants to 868 local businesses, and we've extended retail relief to 524 business ratepayers, totalling around £17.5 million, all the while maintaining essential services and taking necessary steps to temporarily close others. The speed with which these vital funds were dispersed, faster in fact than neighbouring councils, greatly minimised the distress and anxiety experienced by residents. And I thank Simon Freeman and his team for that. And so we cautiously emerge from lockdown and begin to survey the damage, much of which will only become evident over the coming months and maybe years. What we do know is that Harlow has the highest level of furloughed workers in Essex, with 35.2% of workers furloughed, compared to 25% in Chelmsford and Brentwood. More worrying than that even is that Harlow has 40% newly inactive residents, that is furloughed and newly unemployed, compared to 27% in Chelmsford. And our young people are particularly badly hit, whereas Harlow has a claimant count of 8.8% for all adults compared to the national average of 6.5%. Young people in Harlow aged under 24 years old have a claimant count of 12.9% compared to the national average of 8.7%. We also know that employment sectors are being hit differently. The detail of which jobs have been most affected are not yet fully known, but it can be surmised that certain sectors will struggle more to recover. We can see from the national picture that many retail and hospitality outlets will not reopen again, and that staff will be made redundant once the furlough scheme runs out. Harlow has a higher than national average proportion of residents that work in the wholesale and retail industries, with over 8,000 residents working in this sector, equating to 19.5% compared to the national average of 15.2%. For the 800 or so Harlow residents working in the arts, entertainment and recreation sector, the future remains very uncertain, as no date has yet been given for the reopening of these businesses, although this week's announcement of government support for the arts offers some real reassurance. Stansted Airport has of course been massively affected. We're aware that the majority of staff who work at the airport were furloughed, and there have been several announcements recently of companies linked to the airport making large-scale redundancies. We're aware that prior to lockdown, there were around 850 Harlow residents who worked at the airport. It can be surmised that the majority of these will have been furloughed and many will be unemployed. And of course, behind each individual story of hardship, there is the knock-on effect of family on family and loved ones. So, against that deeply worrying backdrop, I'm pleased to propose the COVID-19 Recovery Progress and Working Group Terms of Reference report to Cabinet. It provides the foundations for the Council to develop and deliver an ambitious and far-reaching plan for the town's recovery, which both mitigates the negative impacts on our businesses, voluntary organisations and faith groups, the housing sector and of course residents, as well as looking at the opportunities that have been created and how we capitalise on them. Many, if not all of us, have found new ways of working, of doing business, of socialising, of staying connected, of learning, of travelling around and of helping one another. I'm determined that we hold on to the best of these and use them as the foundation for the growth and prosperity we have long been planning and working towards. But clearly there are going to be enormous economic pressures and funds will inevitably be limited. Therefore, as well as being ambitious about new opportunities, we need to look at existing and planned activity and consider how it might best support the recovery and resilience agenda. I very much look forward to working collaboratively and strategically with the cross-party working group, members of which will in fact be noted under item 16 of tonight's agenda. To that end, recommendation D of this report is that the terms of reference be confirmed at its first meeting on July 22, giving all members the opportunity to contribute. The group will meet monthly thereafter, doing everything within its power to ensure that the Harlow that emerges from COVID-19 is vibrant, sustainable, fair and inclusive, a place where every person can thrive. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Now I've got 3 hands up for questions. No, 3 hands up for comments. Councillor Danvers, Councillor Vince and Councillor Hardware. So let's go to Councillor Danvers. You were first in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. In regards to the compliments that have been already made, I would like to add to our staff, particularly our finance staff. They've had the duty of actually administering something like £31.5 million to businesses and voluntary organisations. And it's been no mean achievement at all that they've been able to actually do that so efficiently and so well. As far as our own finances are concerned, the government has been a little bit more reticent about exactly how they're going to reimburse us. And there's still a bit of a mystery whether in fact we will actually pick up all of the monies. At the moment, we're about £500,000 down, although the Chancellor actually told the nation that it would do what it takes to actually make sure that we should be all right. I think it's been very, very important to businesses. I can comment personally as a trustee of the Gibbard Garden Trust how important our grant was in such a difficult time. We had no income whatsoever, and we were able to keep afloat because of the way in which Harlow Council was able to so efficiently administer this system. So all in all, it's obviously watched this space. It can be quite serious, and Eugene has painted quite a serious picture, particularly in regards to future payment both of council tax and of the business rate. Already organisations have been exempted from the business rate for a period of time, and we remain to see exactly what the government will do to honour its pledge to make sure that local authorities are not yet left to actually just pick up the pieces without the financial support that we need. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Danvers. I see your hand up, Councillor Charles, so I'm going to go to Chris Vince, Councillor Hardware, and then to Councillor Charles. Thank you. Councillor Vince.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm not going to talk for very long. You'll be relieved to know. But yeah, I just want to add my thanks really to that of Councillor Harvey and Councillor Danvers. It's a strange first cabinet meeting as a portfolio holder for me, being talking to you all virtually, as you can imagine. I'm sure it's very strange for a lot of us, and it's obviously really difficult times for everybody. But I did want to just take a moment just to thank all of the council officers who have worked so hard during this really, really difficult time. And look, I may be a councillor that gives them a lot of work to do sometimes, but it really is greatly appreciated, all the work that you've all done, and that goes from the officers obviously that are here today, to our refuge collectors, to our HGS employees, and to the wonderful people at Rainbow Services who have done such a wonderful work for our community. And I think we've really seen what a wonderful community spirit our town has got. So that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vince. I see your hand, Councillor Perrin, but it's Councillor Hardware next. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Harvey has eloquently described the wonderful efforts of the council, of the volunteers, of many people in Harlow, and also the enormous impact COVID-19 has and is having on the town. Then I'd go back to the previous item of producing an initial plan for September or October. I really think that you need a more dynamic approach to this, because the recovery is happening now and we need to be making an impact now. And looking at the actual papers on page, oh dear, I can't see what page, it's the graph on page 36. What about bringing forward an initial plan within weeks and then having kind of monthly reviews and feedback to amend that plan to kind of react to as things happen? I think that'd be a far better approach than just doing something or producing a plan in 2 months' time when probably most of the recovery is over.
Councillor Charles.
I have questions first, as is the convention for Cabinet, and then I have
Yeah,
comments later. So I'm going to go with just purely questions, Chair, if that's okay first. Do you want me to take them one at a time or on block?
I think one at a time, actually. This is a serious enough matter that we really need to delve into it.
I'm just, yeah, because it's a new system, so I just wanted to clarify with you how you wanted to play it. Okay, one question at a time. My first question is, clearly we need action, and we need action as soon as we can with a strategic focus. Will the portfolio holder agree with me that we need to take action for our BAME community who have been disproportionately affected as a result of the coronavirus outbreak? Will the council look at repurposing funds as part of a discussion with the working group going forward to urgently support their needs?
Who wants to take that?
I'll take that. Yes, and yes, unequivocally.
Thank you.
My next question, Chair. The local economy matters. The local economy matters for jobs, prosperity, and a growing town. Will the portfolio agree with me that one of the first actions of the working group must be to set out interim recommendations to support our hardworking local businesses? The government has already supported local businesses with £32 million worth of support, as well as support for the council. But we need more, and we need action. We need focused support from Harlow Council to ferry along action for our local businesses. Does the portfolio holder agree with me that she needs to take more action?
Well, Councillor Charles, I'm not going to agree with you that I personally need to take more action, because I would be being very self-critical if I did that. I think it would be incredibly unfair for any of us to suggest that because there is not a plan in front of us as we speak, that activity is not going on each and every day towards the goal of recovery. And I think it's disingenuous of anyone to suggest that you don't know this is happening. With regards to businesses, I can tell you Andrew Bramage and part of that entire stream of work is closely involved. And I don't know, Andrew, if you want to say anything about the work that you're doing with the local businesses and the local economy, or if you want to hold off for our first meeting on the 22nd. But from the meetings I've had with you, I have every confidence that this council very much has its finger on the pulse of where the local economy and local businesses are feeling the pinch. The great achievement of what we were just talking about, dispersing all these grants, is that we now have a far more complete picture of the local business economy, because not surprisingly, the opportunity to avail oneself of financial support meant that any number of businesses connected with the council, which perhaps have not previously done. So we are in a very strong networked position, as I understand it now, to support the local economy. And I have every confidence that as a dedicated stream of our work, it will be a major priority. And I very much look forward to working with you on that. And I do agree with you on the need to put resource and emphasis on that area of work.
Do you want my next question, Chair?
Please.
Thank you. I just hope, and I understand what the portfolio is saying, that the local economy is one of the first action points of the working group, and I'm sure it will be. My next question is about getting on with the strategic vision for the recovery plan. One of the key elements that we need is a gap analysis to look across council services to identify where the recovery plan needs to take action so it can externally support front-facing services for residents in this town. Is that gap analysis going to be underway soon, or is it already ongoing as part of the internal working groups?
Will I take that question?
If you'd like to.
Yeah, unless Brian, do you want to? I mean, I'm happy to say that I think officers heading up the 4 work streams are getting a very complete picture of where the real need is and where the gaps are. Whether that has been formalised into a gap analysis, I couldn't rightly say, but I think to have some detail of that is a sensible idea, and thank you for it. And I'm looking to Brian now to suggest that that is a very useful input to our first meeting. So thank you.
If I can
anything on that matter?
I can come in briefly, Chair. Yes, the internal working group is doing a gap analysis of all our services, particularly to make sure that we can help the front-facing services and help the community. So we can talk about that more at the working group when it meets in a couple of weeks' time.
Just 2 more questions, Chair, if I may. My next question is around the governance model, which was set out in the, in effect, spider diagram towards the end of the terms of reference for the working group. I echo what Councillor Harvey has said about being strategic. Can I just make a plea? I don't like these spider diagrams, and I think that there is a far more streamlined way for councillors on the working group working on a cross-party basis with heads of service and the CEO to get working better. At the moment, I think the current spidergram is convoluted, it's not streamlined enough, and I just want us to focus more on high-level strategic thinking so that we can push forward with this plan. Do you agree with me?
Councillor Harvey?
Well, actually, I was going to defer either to Simon Hill or to Brian, who was nodding in agreement with that. So I wonder, Brian, if you agree with Councillor Charles and you want to amend the governance model. I personally, when I spoke to Councillor Johnson last night, I talked about the possibility of, you know, because we are a sizable working group, perhaps of breaking into smaller working groups around some of the, around the 4 work streams, and then working in a more detailed way, in a closer way, on with some of the officers. And I had the impression that Councillor Johnson was open to that as a way of working. So I certainly see the opportunity to refine the way we're working for the best strategic outcome, certainly. But I don't personally have a major issue with the governance model. But you're happy, as I said, to be to take input from others. And Brian, if you are in agreement, or Simon Hill, if you want to say something, by all means do.
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, from my point of view, I want to be quite flexible. What works needs to work, and if it doesn't work, we don't do it. And it's about cross-party working. I don't want to be, which is strange from the former head of governance, I know, but from my point of view, let's see what works. Let's work cross-party. Particularly like the idea of making sure it stays strategic. We don't want to get into the fine-tuning detail. Let's make it strategic. Quite happy to look at this, and we'll talk about it again at the working group in a couple of weeks' time. Is that okay with everybody?
It's a very clear direction of travel. My final question, Chair, is around preventing a second wave. All councillors will be focused not only on the recovery, but ensuring that there isn't a second wave or a mini local outbreak in Harlow. Will the portfolio holder agree with me that the working group should look to put together a cross-party response to the Essex Outbreak Engagement Board, setting out the critical infrastructure in our town, the focus areas for public health, in particular our cold storage facilities that could be at risk from many outbreaks?
Good question. Councillor Harvey?
I think that sounds like an excellent suggestion, Councillor Charles. I agree with you.
Thank you. So I'm going to move on now to Councillor Perrin.
Thank you, Chair. And I echo everybody's sentiments in terms of thanking the staff and all the key personnel that have been working very hard throughout this crisis. I have 2 questions, Chair, if I may.
Thank you.
The first one, if you'll just bear with me, the telephone's just going in the background while I'm speaking.
The first question is, I know on page 33 we've outlined the current financial situation of the council. Would Councillor Harvey agree with me that perhaps the working group should work to assist the portfolio holder for resources to devise an interim budget statement as soon as is possible? Because I think in this current climate, we need to really keep a handle on our finances, and if we can support and assist the portfolio holder for resources in doing that, the working group would be well placed to do so.
I think that's something that the working group can decide when they meet, Councillor Perrin.
I was just trying to get an initial steer, Chair, whether she agreed that would be a good way to go.
Councillor Harvey.
Goodness, I feel like the Conservatives are asking me to agree with everything they say. I think that's a sensible suggestion, that we keep a very close watch on expenditure. You know, in my own work, I'm watching every penny that goes out the door. In my own household, I'm watching every penny that goes out the door. I see no reason why the council wouldn't take exactly that same approach. And I, from my conversations with Simon Freeman, have every confidence that he's watching the situation like a hawk. If we need to prepare interim reports to better inform the actions we take, then I think that that is wholly sensible. It just seems
Thank you,
sense.
Councillor Harvey. Councillor Perrin, did you have another question?
I did. In order to therefore assist in that aim of developing an interim budget statement, would it be possible for members of the working group to be given further detail on the proposed forecasts in reduction to loss of income and the increased costs, so that we may begin to sort of formulate, because we need to act sooner rather than later, which I think has been the general consensus that everyone's voiced. And I wonder if that could be sort of circulated to members.
Yeah, Councillor Perrin, I think we're not going to prejudge the work of this working group. The whole point is that they're going to meet very soon. They're going to get on with it very quickly, and anything and everything that is discussed there is being done on a cross-party basis, and you will be informed. But now is not the time to go into the detail. Councillor Andrew Johnson.
May I have a supplementary, Chair?
Go on.
Just generally, because I think members would be just interested to know how those forecasts are arrived at, because they are in the report, and that's where I was really going. And so to have that detail circulated would be, to all members, would be enlightening.
Okay, that's noted. Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. And at this stage, I'd like to ask a question, although I would want to enter into the debate.
Yep, no problem.
My question is to the portfolio holder. It's been 7 weeks since she was appointed as the portfolio holder. Can she tell us all in that time what meetings about recovery she has had with the leader or deputy leader of Essex County Council?
I actually haven't had any, Councillor Johnson. I've had, I think, 4 internal meetings with colleagues on the council, but I haven't yet done that. To be honest with you, I mean, I guess I'm pretty green with all this, but this is the first cabinet meeting since I was made portfolio holder. And I presume from a governance point of view that we had to get the terms of reference through this meeting. I made the point that I did not want to put through a terms of reference that was not consultative cross-party. I feel that had we moved more quickly, there would have been the criticism that we hadn't engaged or consulted with the opposition sufficiently. To be quite honest, we have been working so hard, and I very determinedly listed the work that's been going on, and I very deliberately made the point that every person on this call has been affected by what's gone on. And I think it's reasonable to remind ourselves, I am homeschooling a 9-year-old as well as working full-time trying to save my own organisation. Now, I don't think I should have to apologise for that. And I do not feel that I have fallen down in my responsibilities on this job. And I think to suggest that I have, or that we are behind, is, well, I was going to say unreasonable and I was going to say unkind. I think it's unfair. I think we are in a good position. I want to involve you. You've got access to people at county that, you know, I'm sure you're going to help us with. And, you know, let's get on a good footing with this, Andrew.
Chair,
Councillor John, do you have a second question?
I do indeed, Chair. Just to say that if the portfolio holder needs any assistance with contacting the members at Essex County Council, who will obviously be key to the recovery process, then I would be more than happy, as I said to her last night, to facilitate that. And I just put that offer out in the public domain.
I'm not sure that was a question. Councillor Francis, do you have a question?
Can I rephrase it then, Chair?
I think if you're rephrasing it, will she take you up on it? I'm sure the answer is yes. Councillor Mason.
Apologies, Chair. It's not actually a question. So I am new to this.
Councillor Mason, can we hold on with comments until I've exhausted questions?
Thank you.
Councillor Johnson, your hand's back up. Is that for another question? Councillor Johnson.
No, it's for debate, Chair.
That's for debate. So we've exhausted questions. I've got a comment I want to make. I'll make that later. We're now on to comments. Councillor Mason, you're the first up with comments.
My comment was really picking up on the model. Just for someone who tends to look through the lens of a Pestel model, political, economic, social, technology, environmentally, legal, I think it's worthwhile that we consider, and I know terms of references have to be made, that we look at this and then that we don't make any omissions, really, because actually sometimes when things are quite prescriptive, we can miss out on the obvious. And it's just a way of working, really, that I've noticed that some parts of Harlow Council use when I spoke with the chap around risk, but actually others don't. And I just think, if we can take that into consideration, we won't miss anything, really.
Thank you, Councillor Mason.
Thank you.
Councillor Johnson, you have some comments to make.
Thank you, Chair. And can I start by thanking Councillor Harvey for both the report, but also for the phone call that she gave me last night to talk about the recovery working group. On the call and indeed in her speech tonight, she was both compassionate and heartfelt. And I welcome very much her offer of working collaboratively on a cross-party basis to drive the recovery of Harlow forward. Questions tonight from my members are not necessarily criticisms of the portfolio holder or indeed of the council. However, there is a general feeling from my group that the council has been a bit slow off the bat with the recovery process, and we would like to see the process accelerated. I think you get that from the flavour of the questions tonight. I would like to also thank, as other members have done tonight in the question section, the officers of the council. As Councillor Danvers has said, distributing such a large sum of government money, 32 million, was no mean feat. And I have to say, it gave me some degree of pleasure as a Harlow boy to be on a conversation with an Epping councillor, noticing that Harlow Council actually distributed the government's money faster than Epping did. And I'm not making a party political point there at all. I think our officers have done a sterling job in getting the money. And declaring an interest for a second as a board member of Victoria Hall Theatre, who was one of the recipients of the government's grants. The staff that I dealt with couldn't have been more helpful when I spoke to them on the phone to progress the application for that much needed recovery cash. I think my group has already laid out, and I discussed with Councillor Harvey last night, my group has already laid out 6 key points that we would like to see from any recovery plan. We've done that in the press, and I think it's a shame that the council hadn't already done that. And I hope that the recovery points we have made are well received, as indeed some of the operational points that Councillor Charles has also made in the press, whilst there hasn't been a forum to do those formally. Chair, the recovery process will take a long time, but we are in the middle of it now. And I do think the council needs to act quickly. I think there needs to be a clear separation between the recovery working group or committee or whatever we're calling it of 10 members from both parties that will bring a lot of expertise to the fore and will be able to help the council drive it forward. And indeed the work of the portfolio holder and indeed yourself, Chair, as leader of the council. And I would like to see both of you saying a lot more in public about how the council, both day to day, short term, and in the medium to long term, is going to drive that recovery forward. I think the working group will provide a good deal of backing for that. And I'm happy to put my and my group's contacts and expertise at your disposal during that to work collaboratively for the good of and recovery of our town, because it's important to so many of us. But I would like to see the leadership being taken by yourself and by the portfolio holder, as you have been elected to do.
Councillor Danvers.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to come back into the debate simply because of comment that Councillor Johnson made about Essex County Council. Well, I hope Essex County Council will help Harlow, but at the moment they've been given millions by the government to simply actually try and help people in terms of cycling throughout Essex. And I know you, Chair, have been in the forefront of actually trying to get Essex to get our cycle tracks repaired. We've got a fine network of cycle tracks. And I've seen during this crisis so many people exercising and going back to basically bicycling around the town with their families. But many of them take their lives in their hands simply because of the neglect, the dreadful neglect of our very fine cycle network, pitted with potholes, and no attempt whatsoever to actually address the situation. And to rub salt into the wound, Councillor Bentley, the deputy leader, writes to you and says, no, there's no money for Harlow cycle tracks to be repaired. Absolutely disgraceful, Chair.
Councillor Vince.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies if this doesn't come across very clear. I'm having slight internet connections difficulties, as someone was bound to, and it was bound to be me. I just wanted to welcome actually the question from Councillor Charles about the disproportionate effect that this terrible outbreak has had on the BAME community. And I welcome that on page 32 of the document pack, paragraph 8, the suggestion that obviously the working group is comprised of 10 members, but that it will be also invite relevant people to attend. And I obviously, councillors on my side of the chamber know that I've mentioned this a number of times, the importance of engaging with the BAME community in this recovery plan. And it's also a conversation I've had with Jane Greer about the importance of ensuring that we have BAME representation on the community impact recovery group, which she is leading on. And I know that already she has made that happen. So I'd like to thank her for that and thank the question, because I think it's really important that we recognise that and that needs to be a key focus of any recovery. Thank you.
Right, if there are no other comments, I'll raise my comments before I bring Councillor Harvey back in. Look, I think we've all recognised tonight, councillors, that COVID has haunted this country for 5 months. And thank goodness the number of infections and deaths are now falling. But it's sobering and it's necessary to note that both the infection level and the fatality level are only slightly lower now than they were when we went into lockdown. We are not through this. COVID is still haunting this land. I want to take an opportunity to thank Harlow's residents for the magnificent fortitude they showed in following government guidelines and putting themselves to incredible inconvenience and social dislocation in order to bring the rate of infection down. I want to thank the volunteers who lent their shoulder to the wheel when they were needed. And some of those are here from both parties on this call, but modesty, I'm sure, will make them wish I won't mention their names. And I also want to take this opportunity to express my heartfelt commiserations with the far too many families who've been touched by this tragedy and will continue to be touched by this tragedy. Harlow has acted quickly, despite what the opposition are saying. We took measures to protect this community, very often in advance of the government. When the government was saying, well, I wouldn't go to theatres, we shut our theatre to protect lives. We were decisive and firm, and we put people's lives and health and safety first. And I don't apologise for that. We acted quickly. If you look at page 30 of this report, in the 5 months of this tragedy, we've enabled over 330 workers to access technology to work from home, an extraordinary feat in order to keep people safe. We've introduced measures to create safe working environments at the Civic Centre and at the Latin Bush Centre to allow critical council and third-party services, including National Health Service teams, to continue. We have worked with the county and national planning agencies to ensure a coordinated response for those shielding and for residents requiring assistance. And we've done it well, and we've done it quicker than many of the districts around us. We facilitated the initial setup of the Community Hub service, delivered as a joint initiative between voluntary sector and the council. There's a long list there. I'm not going to go through it all. I'm proud of the response that this council has made ahead of many other councils in Essex and in this country in protecting its residents and maintaining vital services. But this report is about looking forward to the process of rebuilding. It's important that the working group that this report is setting up has the opportunity to set up its own terms of reference. There'd be little point in amalgamating a group of such expertise and experience if we didn't listen to them and their views about how we should be guided. COVID has visited tragedy on communities across the country, and COVID is still visiting tragedies on families in this town. Councillor Harvey was right to say 35% of Harlow's workers have been furloughed. And the end of the furlough scheme, the imminent end of the furlough scheme, will leave many worried about a future of unemployment. Our local council, like all councils of all colours, starved of cash for 10 years by Tory cuts, have worked magnificently protecting communities and delivering government support schemes, often promised without notice or without thought of how councils could deliver, but we've done it. It's now our responsibility to rise to the challenge of rebuilding. And this cross-party working group will signpost the way forward. So I shall be supporting it. Councillor Hardware.
Thank you, Chair. A passionate speech there.
Thank you.
Councillor Danvers has gone off piece to bit about cycleways. I thought I'd better just answer him. First of all, well,
actually, Councillor Hardware, I do appreciate that. I accept that Councillor Danvers went a little bit off piece there. I think he was talking about the cycling for COVID, but let's have a debate about cycle tracks at another time, if we may.
And that's rather unfair because he had a chance to say things which I can answer.
Briefly then, please. You've got a large...
I should be very brief. On the bid that that Harlow submitted for funds, the funds that were allocated by the government, and it was the government that actually refused your request for maintenance, was aimed at towns and high streets that needed to facilitate the opening of retail shops and distancing. So where there was a contravention between roads and pavements. So that's why your bid on the first phase of that money was turned down. On the actual repairs of the cycleways, the Fort County Council have met with Kevin Bentley now twice, and I've agreed with him a 4-point action plan. The first part being producing a list of the major things that need to be sorted out on our cycle paths, which I'm hoping to do with the Harlow Cycle Group and a couple of others and get them done quite quickly. So that's just to clarify the situation.
Lovely. And let me come back briefly on that, Councillor Hardware. It's great that you've got a plan. A dollop of tarmac would be more useful. If you want to know the priorities, of course, the Harlow Council and the Harlow and Gilston Garden Town have been working on a plan which was submitted to the council, and in fact Essex County councillors contributed to it. Councillor Danvers can only go on the rather rude actually rejection of that joint plan, Harlow Gilston Town, Harlow Council and Essex County Council on the basis of the note that was sent to me by Councillor Hardware, which just said no. And precious little else. Let's move on.
I didn't send you a note, it was from Kevin.
Councillor Bentley, apologies. I've promoted you to the portfolio holder for highways. My apologies. I have no other hands up. Councillor Harvey, would you like to sum up them for us?
I don't think there's a great deal more to add. I think we've had an excellent debate, and I hope we've clarified some of the questions that people have. And I just really look forward to seeing everybody on July 22. And thank you in advance for your collaborative and positive contribution to what is going to be an extremely important piece of work.
So given the limitations of this technology, I'm going to assume that the people with a vote here are going to accept recommendation A, B, C and D on page 29 unless they raise a hand at this point.
Agreed.
Right, the no hands are raised, let it be noted. So recommendations A, B, C and D are agreed. We're moving on to now agenda item 11, which is the year-end 2019-2020 performance report. I'm moving that. Do I have a seconder?
Seconded, Chair.
Thank you. So before we go to questions, this report highlights evidence that Harlow Labour Council is an effective council that continues to deliver. The council's performed at or above target for 51 out of 54 of its performance indicators. 51 out of 54. But we'll never be complacent, and we'll not hide from the evidence that points to the areas that need improvement. And there are 3 of those, which I'm sure the relevant portfolio holders may talk on later. But let's be clear. The good news here massively outweighs the areas of improvement. And some particular areas of interest to me, having taken on an environmental brief really, is that we met our target to reduce carbon dioxide emissions, and we met that ahead of the target date. That we promised we'd plant 1,000 trees. We planted 5,000 trees. Despite the pandemic, this report shows that Harlow has much to look forward to. As a council, we will ensure to keep pressing for the investment and attention our town needs to develop. And we'll continue to aim high in providing day-to-day services. We are an effective council that delivers. Are there any questions? Councillor Charles, you're first.
Thank you, Chair. Strategic direction is crucial during the recovery. And when we look at page 45 of the Council's 5 priorities for 1920, what should be number 1? Resilience and recovery. Although more and better housing is important, the portfolio holder has the power in the 7 weeks she's been in post to amend the priorities and submit an urgent amendment to Cabinet. We need to get on with the recovery and resilience.
There a question.
The council needs that structure. Why hasn't the portfolio holder made an amendment to the priorities to put number 1, recovery and resilience?
Okay, I'll take that question. This is a report that looks back from 2019 to 2020, and we cannot retrospectively change the aims from 2019 to 2020. Do you have another question?
I do, because we're in 2020, and irrespective of the year passage, an amendment can be made by a portfolio holder to the priorities to flow into the next financial year. I'm disappointed that the council doesn't have the strategic direction and the number 1 priority for resilience and recovery. Will the leader rectify this?
I don't accept what you're saying. This is a report that looks back from 2019, 2020, and while Tories are very keen to rewrite history, I'm not going to do it. Certainly, I suspect that when we set our priorities for 2020, 2021, the pandemic will feature in it. Councillor Charles, any more?
No, I'm grateful for that answer.
Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chair. The elephant in the room on this report is there is no financial information whatsoever when there is a full suite of the operational measures and comprehensive reports from HCS on improvements. So where is the financial information? Yeah, I get that the finance team have been busy with the grants and what have you, but that all came some time after the lockdown began, and 95% of the financial information for 2019-20 will be available. You must have some idea as to what the financial position is to arrive at table 1 on page 33. So, you know, when can we expect the information about the finances for which we, all of us, all the members, are accountable for? I don't see why or how we should be kept away from that information.
Thank you, Councillor Carter. Councillor Danvers, would you like to answer that?
Well, thank you, Chair. I've shared the financial situation with all the members of the majority group, and I've also shared the financial information with Councillor Perry, who I believe is the opposition opposite number. So I think really the question should be directed at him, not at me.
Thank you. There being no more questions, does anybody have any comments they would like to make?
Sorry, Chair, I do have another question.
Oh, okay. Please go ahead, Councillor Carter.
On page 54, where we talk about the HCS performance, there's a reference under the safety, health, environment and compliance that they've completed nearly 490, well, completed nearly 500,000 working hours without an incident. And I thought it might be appropriate for the shareholder and owner to pass on their thanks to the company for focusing on health and well-being, and by the staff as well.
Indeed, thank you, Councillor Carter. I'll turn that into a question. You're asking if I will do that. Yes, I'll certainly pass on our congratulations. Thank you. Councillor Perrin, is this a question?
No, Chair, you were moving into comment before.
Yeah, I know, but then
I
appreciate that. So if anybody has another question, because Councillor Carter came in with a last minute question there. If nobody else has another question, we'll move on to comments. Councillor Perry.
Right, Councillor Johnson is waving his hand. I think he has a question.
Okay, he's underneath Councillor Perrin on my list. Councillor Johnson, if it's a question, I can't see your face. All I can see is 6 faces and a participants list. So
no,
please,
I accept that, Chair. Once again, my hand has been raised.
Yeah, and I see it there underneath Councillor Perrin's. You were next on my list.
Thank you, Chair. Can I direct people to page 59 of the report? Invoices paid within 30 days.
Yeah.
The cash flow around the town and around the wider economy is incredibly important. The performance situation says that whilst training is key to addressing this issue, it was not undertaken in Q3. Now, Q3 was well before the COVID crisis. There was obviously a problem brewing within the council. Training was identified as the need, the response to correct this. But for some reason, the council chose not to undertake that training in Q3. Can I ask why?
Indeed, you can, Councillor Johnson. I'm very aware of how damaging late payment of invoices is, particularly to small businesses, and I share your concern with that. Councillor Danvers.
Yeah, I agree absolutely, Chair. And we need to address this. There's no question of that. Okay. I don't know if Simon Freeman wants to make any further comment.
Mr. Freeman.
Yeah, all I'd add to the comments is that whilst we recognise the fall in performance, we were very much focused on the year-end preparation during February and March, which really was a divert from our resources to be able to undertake training at the same time. Effectively, the team that would do that training is a team of 2 people, And while they were very much doing the best they could to hit the target, they also had year-end preparation to focus on, and that was where the focus lay. They're now working towards the delivery of that training, and I'm expecting to see an improvement in those performance figures when we report during 2021.
Indeed. Councillor Danvers, do you want to come back in on that one?
Yeah, just Chair, I think it's really cheeky of the opposition to say any of this at all. Local government has suffered cut after cut after cut. We used to employ 1,500 people. We now employ 400. We do our best. We struggle through. We're an efficient authority. But at the end of the day, when a Tory government over the last 10 years has taken so much away from local authorities that the opposition members just glibly say, oh, you should have done this and you should have done that. Well, quite frankly, we are doing very, very well indeed, given the very limited resources that we have at our disposal. And I think the opposition members should be in shame at the way in which local authorities have actually had to cope with all of these cuts and to be critical of some of the performances. Yes, we need more staff, but at the end of the day, we can't afford them.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Danvers. Now, look, I know Councillor Perrin is waiting. He's the only hand up I've got at the moment for a comment. If anybody else has a question, please.
Yeah, can I follow up with 2 questions to my original? 2 supplementary?
Yes, please.
Thank you. So the first supplementary, Mr. Freeman has mentioned in his answer the problems that the year end affected in January and February, which is of course in Q4. And I understand how busy a finance team is in Q4. I run one myself. But the comment within the report says that training was not taken and undertaken in Q3. Can I ask again why that training wasn't undertaken in Q3?
Mr. Freeman.
Yeah, I'll just come back to the point I made in the original answer, really, that we have an exceptionally small team, and trying to coordinate an online training program has been quite challenging for them. So that was being developed, and now we are waiting for an opportunity to roll that out with service areas.
Thank you. One more question, is it, Councillor Johnson?
No, I'll leave it there, Chair, given the time.
Okay, thank you very much. So thank you for being patient. Councillor Perrin, your comments.
Just to respond to 2 things that have been raised, and this mention about being short-staffed and we need to employ more staff. I believe when we moved the budget, or you moved your budget at the beginning of the year, you employed a whole raft of new people on various contracts because you said that we could afford to. And one would have thought when we've asked for detail on the numbers and the reasons why people are being employed in the various areas they are, one would have thought that if this was such an area of need, those resources could have been deployed in this area. That's just one observation. And the second point I want to make is, yes, I thank Councillor Danvers for sharing the financial updates and briefing me on those via email. That's very, very helpful. But I will point out it's not my responsibility to feed that information into a public document of this nature, which I believe is what Councillor Carter was aiming at. So I just feel like he needs to remember that he's the portfolio holder for resources, not me.
Any other comments on this report? I can see no hands up, so I'll quickly get back to the right page. 37. So I'm going to assume that we are happy to accept recommendation A, unless anybody electronically or otherwise raises their hand. Okay, that is agreed.
Agreed, Chair.
Thank you. That moves us then on to the Energy Procurement Framework Review, which is on pages 65 to 70.
So moved, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Danvers, and I will second it. Do you want anything to say on that?
Yeah, the report sets out the results of the value for money review of the arrangements for the gas and electricity, which have been in place since 2017. The report sets out financial savings that can be demonstrated of £83,000 of gas supplies and £160,000 of electricity supplies. In addition, there's a sound contract management arrangement in place. And there have been significant reductions in the council's carbon emissions as a result of the electricity supply being provided by 100% renewable sources. This aligns with the council's climate emergency declaration and has accelerated the reduction in the council's emissions and the achievement of its own carbon targets. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So we're looking at questions on item 12. I've got no hands up. Any comments on item 12? No hands up. So are we happy? Well, I'm going to accept A and B unless somebody raises a hand in objection.
Agreed.
Okie doke. No hands have been raised. Let it be noted. So we agree. Agenda item 12. Let's move on then to agenda item 13, which those of you with paper copies will find on page 71 to 74, that being the flat block refurbishment of 97 to 126 The Hydes. Who's moving this?
I'd like to formally move this, please, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. And do we have a seconder?
I'll be delighted to second this, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Durkan. Councillor Wilkinson, anything you want to say on this?
No, Chair, it's quite straightforward. I'm happy to take any questions that I receive.
Okie doke. I'll give people a moment to indicate if they want a question. No questions. Any comments then? In which case I'll assume that we're accepting recommendation A unless anybody voices an objection.
Agreed.
Agreed.
I'm taking that as agreed then, because no hands were raised. And we now move on, please, to the item 14, which is the procurement strategy on pages 75 to 90. Who's moving that, please?
Yes, Chair, I am. Thank you.
Seconded, Chair.
Thank you. Francis, have you some words you want to say on this? So, Councillor
Okay.
Mason.
Thank you. Just briefly, there's a number of reasons why this has come about. It was last reviewed in 2018. We've had to incorporate things, for example, climate change, equality and diversity, safeguarding duties, modern slavery and human trafficking, the LGA National Procurement Strategy, and also council procurement protocols, living wage, apprenticeships. I could go on. So maybe I won't go on. If there's any questions, I can take it from there. Thank you.
Okay. So Councillor Charles, I see your hand raised for a question.
Question and then comment, Chair. So my question to Councillor Francis Mason is, Essex County Council, as part of the recovery plan for the county, want to focus on the Essex pound. We need to focus on the Harlow pound. And as part of their measures, they're looking to, within the confines of procurement legislation, to weight their procurements in favour of local suppliers. Why has Harlow Council not reflected that in the procurement strategy?
Councillor Mason.
Thank you. I'm very much focused on the Harlow pound, definitely. And actually the strategy links to the council's standing orders, which continue to allow the council's trading arm and or qualified local suppliers to be selected to bid for work in support of the Harlow pound.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Charles, do you have any more questions? If you could save your comments until anybody, okay. Are there any more questions? In which case we do come to you for your comment then, Councillor Charles.
Thank you, Chair. The procurement strategy is another example of what is lacking in the council at the moment. There is a gulf in strategic vision, and there is a paralysis around understanding the different parts of the council that need to form together to improve the resilience and recovery of our town. Essex County Council have been quite open with districts about their intentions to tweak the procurement strategy in line with legislation. And of course, one of the guiding principles is the Social Value Act. I would have hoped that Harlow Council would have reflected this in the procurement strategy. And it's another example where the council is not looking and identifying opportunities to increase the momentum of the council's resources and focus it on the recovery. We need to invest in the Harlow Pound. That's not properly identified, although in a short line in the procurement strategy. And I'm disappointed that an opportunity wasn't used by the portfolio holder for resilience and recovery to work with her colleague, Councillor Frances Mason, to propel this and push it forward.
I'm going to reject what you've said there, Councillor Charles. It seems to me that, if anything, what you're saying is Essex County Council are at last catching up with Harlow. It's in our standing orders. They've had to put it in a change of policy. It already was part of our policy, and so Councillor Mason made that very clear. Councillor Mason, do you want to sum up? Nobody else has put their hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll just go on a little bit more. It's really important that as a local authority, we are flexible and that we can adapt quickly to changing policy, etc. So actually our officers are continually closely monitoring all the processes to make sure that they reflect policy change and where recovery relaxations are regulated. So we're actually doing that very carefully. We have a corporate social responsibility. So indeed, officers, I'll just add this, may ask bidders to confirm their position around apprenticeships. And I know that that's something very dear to the heart of our community, really, and our opposition. And that within a COVID response work, there have been opportunities within the council purchasing and through HTS, use of local contractors to support the housing. And I'll finally just reinforce, it is about preventing discriminatory practice. There's also an element around Brexit for delegated powers to update the strategy, and also for major changes proposals, discretion should be reported to members. So I, you know, in terms of us being lawful, ethical and having a value for money, and yes, as a Labour and cooperative councillor, I'm very much about investing the Harlow pound in Harlow. So, you know, and one last thing, it incorporates risk management, Nolan principles, and I won't go on anymore because I'm aware of time, but hopefully that should suffice.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Mason. There are two recommendations, recommendation A and B. Unless anybody objects, I'm going to accept agree those recommendations.
Agreed.
And it be noted that nobody has raised a hand to object, so recommendations A and B are duly agreed. That then moves us on to item 15, the portfolio holder delegations, pages 91 to 101. Are we happy to note those? Again, I'll take it in the negative. If anybody doesn't want to note those, please raise your hands. Nobody's raised. So I'm going to formally note the portfolio holder delegations, and then we move on to item 16. On pages 102, 103, the appointment of Cabinet Overview Working Group panels and partner bodies. Let me find the relevant page. Unless anyone has any questions or comments on that, I'll take it in the reverse again. I'll assume this is agreed unless anybody raises a hand or speaks up against it.
Agreed.
And nobody has done that. So we've agreed that appointment. We come come to penultimately item 17, communications from committees, working groups, parties and panels, a referral from the scrutiny committee. Councillor Mason, do you want to move this?
Yes, I am, thank you.
And Councillor Vince?
Yeah, I second it, yes, Chair.
Lovely, thank you very much. Councillor Mason, have you got any words you want to say before we move to questions?
Just very briefly, this has come about, the need really arises from government guidance, really, to ensure that there's regular engagement between Cabinet and scrutiny, and that there's independence of committee from Cabinet to be constructive, managing the committee's resources and being outcome led. Maybe it's best to go straight to questions first of all, and I can add more at the end. Need me? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You might be lucky, Councillor Mason, because no one's indicating a question. Okay, they've had an opportunity. Has anybody got any comments they want to raise on this? Do you want to sum up, Councillor Mason?
Thank you. So the recommendation is really about procedural changes, expectation that Cabinet members will attend scrutiny if requested. It allows scrutiny to look at the Cabinet matters before a decision is made to fulfil the role of a critical friend. If there's no questions on it, I won't carry on. I think it's important to acknowledge the work of the Cabinet Overview Working Group, which is a cross-party group that has brought this to this stage in the process. The only change in terms of reference is for a procedure, an annual report to full council, and this will help demonstrate its value. But overall, I need to go to the vote, really.
Yes, lovely. I'd like to
thank you.
I'd like to thank the chair of the Cabinet Overview Working Group and the Scrutiny Committee. Are we happy to accept, well, in the reverse, if anybody doesn't accept recommendations A and B, please raise your hands or speak out. It would be noted that nobody has raised their hand, therefore we're accepting recommendation A and B. So we move on to the minutes of the panel's working groups, which includes the minutes of the Safety Committee and the Cabinet Overview Working Group. Any comments or questions? Then unless anybody objects, we'll mark those as noted. And nobody's raised a hand, so I'm going to mark those as noted. I've been given no matters of urgent business. So at 21:02, thank you all for your time. Thank you for your forbearance with my clumsy attempts at manipulating the technology. We got through it and we will continue to get through it. Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks, Chair.